Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, debt slaves, serfs, peasants, vassals, meat sacks. That's exactly what Mitt Romney calls you too. I'm useful idiot. Welcome. Let's go back to the good old USA and I watched this Mitt Romney speech because I knew it was going to be a tragic affair because we have the status quo GOP is so freaking desperate right now. They're dragging out people like George Bush to do chest bumps with his buddy Jeb, his brother Jeb, and then dragging out old Mitt Romney. And kind of interesting that to drag out their failed candidate from last time, who couldn't even beat Barack Obama, and they come out here and have him beg and squirm in order to take down Trump. And all it does is show their desperation more and more. And the speech confirmed everything I thought. So let's do a rundown of what he did in the speech. Well, first of all, he brings up Reagan practically the second sentence, so we knew that was coming. Brings up the Reagan reference to a 1964 speech, and then gives a warning about how dangerous Trump is to first the Republican Party and then, more importantly, the country. Although you notice that he does say the Republican Party first, so it is a definite threat to the Republican Party. And then he goes on to make all kinds of ludicrous claims. One of them, he says he criticizes Trump because he inherited his business and he didn't create it, and certainly that can be charges that can be brought against Mitt Romney as well. In fact, the hypocrisy in this speech was pretty stunning. But as I always say, hypocrisy is the coin of the realm for these people, and so we should always expect plenty of it. Then he goes down this whole long list about poverty. He doesn't want to talk about income equality, but he wants to talk about how heartbreaking it is that there's still poverty and wages are stagnant, and there's massacres and the dangers from Iran and the dangers from Putin and the dangers from China and the dangers from North Korea. So we have this fear mongering again, and basically saying once again, oh well, you know, you got to get a Republican in there, just not Trump, and then they'll fix everything. And the same old tired economic fear rhetoric about, well, if you vote for Trump and he gets to be president, then we're going to go into a recession and you're all going to lose your jobs. And then because I love the best, he criticizes Trump for being a successful businessman and challenges that. And you really have to look at Trump's record. Although it is crazy, he lands on his feet. He might be the quintessential American businessman in that respect. And then you look at Romney, and he completely ignores, of course, his own background. And I'll attach an article below that goes into all his operations with Bain and the company that he used. And pretty hilarious for Mitt Romney to consider himself a businessman. And we remember that came up during the campaign. And then, you know, Romney goes on about how Trump's policies are too vague. And, of course, that's what everybody complained about. Romney's policies were too vague. And then Romney begs everyone to vote for anybody but Trump. So now he's saying Rubio, Cruz, and Kasich. And kind of interesting that they're all a bunch of status quo GOP loser candidates like Romney. And, of course, he would be wanting the party to support somebody like that. And then Trump is bombast, scares world leaders. That's another claim made by Romney. And I think by nature, the world's leaders are scared of America's leaders, and I think they'd rather deal with somebody who's a little more upfront about it. And frankly, it seems like a lot of people in the United States certainly admire Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, and he has a personality that's rather similar to Mr. Trump's. And then he goes on to criticize the foreign policy of Trump, talking about how crazy, what a crazy idea to let ISIS take out Assad, when essentially that has been U.S. policy up to now, is to let ISIS try and take out Assad. And now that the Russians are in there, well, now it sounds like a crazy idea. And then he criticizes Trump for admiring Putin. I think anybody that's paying any attention to Putin might have a lot of feelings about him, but should certainly respect him. And then Trump has the audacity to call George W. Bush a liar, and George W. Bush is a liar, so it seems to me it's pretty appropriate to call him a liar. And then he goes on to say that he starts taking his bashes the Democrats, of course, because he needs to get somebody like Cruz or Kozic or Rubio in there to take on these Clintons, and talks about how the Clintons embody crony capitalism. I thought if they had a laugh track, that would be the place in Mitt Romney's speech to put it in when he talked about the Clintons and how they embody crony capitalism. So once again, I recommend that people read the article attached below about Mitt Romney and his Bain Capital, and talk about embodying crony capitalism. And then he starts getting a little nasty himself after spending most of the speech talking about how Trump is so nasty. He goes on to call Trump a con man, a fake, a phony, and essentially a flip-flopper, which is interesting because those are all the claims made against Mitt Romney when he ran for president, that he's a phony, a fake, a flip-flopper, and a con man. And then he goes after Trump's tax returns. And, I'm sure if anyone ever got to see the Romney family's extended tax returns, there's plenty of bombshells in there, but we'll never see them. So that's a moot point. And I also recommend that if people want to talk about Romney, and here he is criticizing the way that Trump speaks. We know how Romney speaks when he's in a room full of his peers and not to the American people, because we have the tape of the secret meeting when he was running for Congress, running for presidency, and those recordings reveal a quite different, more outspoken and condescending person that Romney seems to find distasteful, these qualities in other people. And then once again, Romney wraps up the end with mentioning Ronald Reagan again, and then brings up a John Adams quote about how democracies commit suicide. And of course, that always seems appropriate when you're desperate and want to funnel this fear and this anger. And then he goes on to talk about how you should take this fear and anger and transform it into something that means something, that's constructive. And of course, that's the way the elitists always talk about transforming anger. I think the fact that Trump is expressing a lot of people's frustration and anger out there is probably a healthy thing, and not this kind of statist, elitist, imaginary world where you take your anger and you transform it back into supporting the state. And then the bottom line, of course, Romney finishing up with talking about how Trump as a presidential candidate, all his promises are worthless. But that's what makes a presidential candidate in the United States in my lifetime, and that's being able to count on the fact that all their promises are always worthless. And I should finish up there because that's a good spot to do it. But I just want to reiterate once again, I'm not necessarily a Trump supporter in a lot of ways. He is a intimidating person, and his policies are somewhat intimidating. But at the same time, anybody that can cause this much discomfort and this much squirming and this much of a threat to the status quo GOP party, or any other party for that matter, if it's a threat to the Democratic Party as well, then I say bring it on. It's interesting to see. And frankly, before the day is done, I can't imagine it'd be any worse than anything we've ever had before. But who knows? At least it'll make my view counts go up if Trump gets to be president, because people are going to be watching all this crazy shit every day, aren't they? I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?